I would say one of the most requested videos I get in the comment section is to do a video on assistant coaches who could one day be the next big thing. While I didn't really take it that seriously, as I finally dug into it, it's actually really fascinating, and today, we're going to talk about 10 assistant coaches who could be a head coach at your favorite school sometime soon. We're going to go through who they are, why they have so much hype, and where they could end up in the future. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about these big-time assistant head coaches. So the first one I want to talk about is Glenn Schumann. He's Georgia's current defensive coordinator, and that seems to be a spot that gets big-time recognition. He's the guy who has the most likely headshot of being a head coach here soon, and at 34, he's one of the youngest coordinators in the country and has already succeeded at a very high level for the Georgia Bulldogs defense. He started his career as a graduate assistant at Bama and has followed Kirby Smart to Georgia, where he was the DC the last 2 years after being the co-defensive coordinator with Dan Lanning in 2019 to 2021. As the linebackers coach, he coached guys such as Roquan Smith and Nakobe Dean, and he of course has been a part of the last few awesome Georgia defenses and Georgia teams in general. He was their head defensive coordinator for their national championship game against TCU, and they absolutely demolished him. Opposing offenses were held to 14 points per game in 2022 and 16 points per game in 2023, which was good enough to be top 5 in the country. He's also been groomed by Kirby Smart, is a good recruiter, has experience at a high level, and I think will get a chance to be a head coach at a lower Power 5 program here soon. The second guy we need to talk about is Steve Belichick. You probably know that last name, as he is the son of Bill Belichick, and I think part of the reason he could be one of the next big coaches is because of nepotism and because of his name. He's now the defensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies and should instantly get some traction as a head coach at the collegiate level. He's only 37 years old, but has spent the last 12 years in coaching positions with the New England Patriots. From 2012 to 2015, he was a defensive assistant, but quickly moved up the coaching ladder in 2016 to coaching safeties and defensive backs in 2019 and linebackers in 2020. This will be his first year coordinating a defense, and it's with the Washington Huskies, who are making their inaugural season in the Big Ten. He has plenty of knowledge of defense, and also has a dad who can probably help him out a little bit. And while he's still a relative unknown, it's safe to say he's probably going to be pretty good. Even if he's not, his last name alone will get a lot of athletic directors interested, and I think he could be a head coach in the next couple of years. Or he'll completely flame out, I have no idea. Third coach we need to talk about is Tashard Choice. He is currently the running backs coach for the Texas Longhorns, but his body of work speaks for itself. He was a former NFL running back, and he's been in coaching since 2016. He was an intern for the Dallas Cowboys, then took a job at North Texas before becoming the running backs coach at Georgia Tech in 2019. While the Yellow Jackets struggled during his tenure as a coach, it wasn't because of the running backs. He had both Jordan Mason, Jamarius Griffin, and even Jahmyr Gibbs, as all three of those guys ended up sniffing the NFL, and the team would average 150 yards per game. Jahmyr Gibbs was the best of the three of them, but he has been able to mold running backs into big-time playmakers. While at one point he thought about going to USC, he ended up at Texas for the 2022 season, where he started working on coaching Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, and Jonathan Brooks. All three of those guys would end up getting drafted, and two of them would be the first running back taken in their selected draft class. He's one of the greatest running back coaches in the league right now, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do with CJ Baxter this upcoming season. We'll just have to wait and see, but first he'll probably be elevated to an offensive coordinator before he becomes a head coach. After that, we get to talk about Connor Riley. He's currently the Kansas State offensive line coach and offensive coordinator, and he will step in for Colin Klein. He's been coaching with Chris Kleiman since they were both at North Dakota State, and he has a track record of turning lower recruited guys into All-Americans. He started doing this at Nebraska Omaha in 2003, and then in 2013, he became the tight ends coach and the fullbacks coach for North Dakota State. Eventually, he moved over to the offensive line, coaching NFL guys such as Joe Haig. He also ran an offense that ran all over the Missouri Valley and won multiple national championships before he followed Kleiman to K-State in 2019. Since he's been in Manhattan, he's produced one of the top offensive lines in the country year in and year out, and that was headlined by Cooper Beebe, who was the top-ranked guard in the country last year. His lines at Kansas State have been consistently ranked near the top in sacks allowed, and recently with Colin Klein going to A&M, he has now become their offensive coordinator alongside Matt Wells. If he continues this level of success, it won't be surprising to see him in a head coaching position. Granted, I think that'd be more at the group of 5 level, but he's definitely one of those names to keep an eye on. And number 5, we have an interesting name. We need to talk about Iman Nagavi. He's the offensive line coach for the Houston Cougars, and at just 37 years old, he's another young and up-and-coming coach in the NCAA who's made the jump up to leadership pretty quickly. He started his coaching career in 2011 with McNeese State, coaching both the offensive line and tight ends. After a brief stint at Texas, he came back to the head offensive line coach in his mid-20s before taking the same job at Louisiana Monroe in 2017. He was eventually elevated to offensive coordinator at ULM in 2020, but the Warhawks struggled immensely. He eventually left to be the offensive line coach at Georgia State, and he's been on the rise since then. He went from Georgia State in 2021 to Tulane in 2022 and helped them have their miracle season and Cotton Bowl victory over USC, and then in 2023, he went with Dana Holgorsen to Houston to be the offensive line coach and OC. Since he'd been at Willie Fritz's staff at Tulane, when he was hired to be the next head coach at Houston, he decided to keep Iman around. He's proven to be very good at taking smaller recruits and turning them into efficient offensive linemen, and has already been an offensive coordinator multiple times. While both of those times didn't necessarily work out, he's still young and he's got a ton of experience, and there's plenty of time for him to develop in that department. At number 6, we have a guy who I'm very familiar with, and that is Blake Baker. Missouri's worst kept secret over the last few years was how good of a defensive coordinator he was. He helped turn Mizzou's defense back into their glory day status, and these last 2 years Mizzou's defense has been really great. He ended up doing so well that LSU essentially wrote him a blank check, and he's now the DC there. He started his coaching career as a grad assistant at Texas before he joined Elijah Drinkwitz at Arkansas State to be their safeties coach. He spent the next 5 years at Louisiana Tech, coaching both safeties and linebackers, before he went over to Miami in 2019 to be the DC and linebackers coach there. He's also LSU's linebackers coach in 2021 and became the Missouri DC in 2022. Blake coached a defense that only allowed 25 points per game in 2022 and 20 points per game in 2023. He also had some very talented defensive backs that have come through him, like L'Jarius Sneed while he was at Louisiana Tech, and then both Ennis Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Drain, 2 superstar corners for the Tigers. Given his success at all these programs, it makes sense he's next in line for a future head coaching job, especially if he does well at a school like LSU, adding the fact that he's a good recruiter and he's relatively young, and he honestly might have the second best chance of being a head coach outside of Glenn Schumann right now. Another guy to watch out for is Alex Atkins. He's currently Florida State's offensive coordinator, and that is a pretty good spot to be in. Kenny Dillingham was that just a couple of years ago, and Atkins might be one of the next up. Florida State had one of the craziest stories last season and almost made the college football playoff before the Jordan Travis injury, but a huge part of their success was because of their offensive coordinator, Alex Atkins. He started his career as a graduate assistant at UT Martin in 2007, and then spent a few years traveling around the country coaching tight ends and the offensive line before he ended up at Georgia Southern in 2014 coaching the offensive line. From there, he moved on to Tulane in 2016, becoming their assistant head coach and line coach. He was then a true offensive coordinator at Charlotte for 1 year in 2019 before he moved south to take the offensive line job at Florida State in 2020. He ended up being elevated to OC in 2022, and his career has essentially been rocket fuel, and it's easy to see why. Everywhere he's gone has had immense success in the running game, and his knowledge on how to work the offensive line has rubbed off on every team he's coached. He's on the fast track to becoming a head coach in the FBS sometime soon, especially if Florida State reloads for another playoff run. I'd say the biggest name and most recognizable name on this list is Brian Hartline, and he's who we have at number 8. He has recruited the wide receiver position at Ohio State like we have never seen. Currently, he's both the wide receivers coach and the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes, and his name has been tossed around for multiple head coaching jobs, and it's pretty clear why. He was a former NFL receiver, and he ended up going back to his alma mater to coach receivers in 2017. He's elevated to offensive coordinator in 2023, and he remains in that role alongside Chip Kelly for the 2024 season. Ohio State has been pumping out monster wide receivers for a while now, with guys like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marvin Harrison Jr. They've all become household names, and he's had a hand in making each and every one of them dominant receivers. He'll now have an opportunity to coach up a couple more players, and it looks like Igmeka Egbuka is next in line, plus they landed Jeremiah Smith, who some believe is generational. While he's clearly one of the top offensive coordinators in the country, he hasn't shown that much interest in leaving Ohio State, which is why he's on this list but not near the top. If he does choose to lead the Buckeyes though, it's not difficult to imagine he will have success. At number 9 we have Andy Kotelnicki. He's been a pretty big name over the last few years, and some call him a mad scientist of play calling. He ended up following his head coach Lance Leipold from Buffalo to Kansas a few years ago, and he is most known for turning Jalen Daniels from a 2-star recruit to a potential Heisman candidate for the Jayhawks. He's done this by being one of the best offensive play callers at the collegiate level, using both his scheme and football IQ to maneuver players like chess pieces against the best defenses in college football. He started his coaching career at Western Illinois in 2004, and then became an offensive coordinator ever since. He made the jump from Wisconsin River Falls to Mary College to then D3 Power Wisconsin Whitewater before following Coach Leipold to Buffalo in 2015. He He made his first coaching step away from Leipold to go to Penn State this past offseason, and his signing alone instantly makes the Nittany Lions a threat in the Big Ten. He has plenty of guys to work with, especially guys like Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and their star quarterback Drew Allar, and I'm really excited to see what he can do at Penn State. The offense has been lacking a little bit these last few years for the Lions, and honestly, Kotelnicki could have such big year that he could become a head coach right away. He's, in my opinion, the biggest boom or bust coach on this list, and I'm super excited to watch what he does in Happy Valley. Finally, at number 10, we need to talk about Rashad Samples. He's currently the Oregon running back coach, and while he is one of the more obscure names in college football, I believe he has a bright future in the league. He was a former 4-star recruit who had to retire due to concussion injuries, and he did not want to leave football entirely, so he went into coaching. He started as an assistant coach with Houston before he moved to Texas, and then became the assistant receivers coach in 2018. He then left for SMU in 2019 to be an offensive assistant, before being elevated to running backs coach and recruiting coordinator for the Mustangs in 2020. After a couple of years there, he left for the Rams running backs job in 2022, and then went to Arizona State in 2023. Recently, he was hired by Oregon to be their assistant head coach and running backs coach, and he's done all this before he's turned 30. He's just 29. While he has a lot of career ahead of him still, it's clear he's learned a lot, has been around, and has a pretty high ceiling as a coach. He's probably the most unknown guy on the list, but only time will tell how good he could be. So yeah, there's probably plenty of coordinators and coaches I totally forgot about, and if I should make a part 2, let me know down below, and let me know what coach I forgot. Also, give me another list video I should do next, and don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about 10 crazy stadium changes that are coming to college football. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.